Is arc good in all games? This is a question which rarely somebody tries to answer properly. It is often limited to a best difference between the two and not what the issues you are going to encounter or you're going into greater detail of how we actually perform. How efficient they are, how problematic one or the other is. This video I want to do background research into whatever arc GPUs are good for gaming, better solved titles, or if you are better with Nvidia GPU. I own Arc A7070 and RTX 5080. I do think what comparison is fair because if you need a GPU to game all games, with you should buy an outdated muscle GPU. The appreciation get with cards guard, and I bought my own RTX 5080 EVGA Ultra Edition for 360 euros. Meanwhile, I got Arc 7070 for 300 euros. These cars are in the same league, at least price wise, but it is hard a comparison to make. This footage is recorded with Arc GPU, but nobody's telling you is what Arc GPU has a long-standing driver issues which nobody cares about. Some textures on the ground doesn't render properly. This is one of more extreme examples. In Starfield, ground textures have a filter of some sort on them. In World of Tanks, Arc GPUs cannot render water and you see right through where a lake should be. While some games refuse to launch altogether because they pick integrated AMD GPU by default and simply refuse to use Arc GPU. A lot of such issues which Intel surprisingly didn't fix it throughout its time it was on the market. So the first game is Assassin's Creed. It is an old one's flagship title, and I believe it is a good representation of what it takes to run old games. It has old quirky engine which doesn't function anymore properly, and it is interesting to see which game performs better than the other. I couldn't really benchmark one area, but it is starting area but different quests. So it is about similarly taxing situation. So let's take where both GPUs are starting to work properly from 13 frame. Let's ignore these big dips. 170. And let's start from 99% FPS data. Uh, as you can see, there are some bugs with Rush F Info 64 benchmarking software because it can produce this errant performance which isn't realistic. It is bugged performance from recording software. So let's take 41. As you can see, Nvidia GPU has a 52% lead in this game. And from FPS data, they both are producing massive amounts of frames, but they both are seeing massive jumps or downward spikes in performance. Here is one FPS data. Well, again, Nvidia GPU is a lot better, but we are running into the problem with game engine, which produces with massive negative spikes in performance, and it is especially noticeable on Nvidia GPU because it runs so much better this game. But for some reason, game engine has some massive issues. Yeah, we can see that. We have a GPU and a CPU wait time. If GPU is waiting, it is either game engine, CPU, or something in GPU which can't give frames fast enough. It might be bottlenecked by VRAM or memory bandwidth or alike. In this case, we are seeing that ARC GPU is the one still bottlenecking this game because CPU we see CPU wait time which isn't present in Nvidia GPU. So this is where a famous ARC overget issue with CPUs. It's aggregate. In all games, you can get CPU bottlenecked. I'm running X 3D processors from AMD. And yeah, we can see how much one CPU is running harder than the other. It is interesting data to see if which one GPU has more potential headroom for the super sampling, or just to be more stable in more difficult to render situations. As you can see, with both GPUs are running within about 10 points difference. Nvidia GPU is running about 90%, it is fully working, and Arc GPU in this one is taking it easier, as you can see from just all the performance data. And here is VRAM. You can see that Arc GPU uses less VRAM, and this is the interesting thing. But NVIDIA GPUs often use more VRAM when you least expect it. In all the titles, even if the VRAM is faster and it has more memory bandwidth, it tries to preload more assets to have more stable performance. But in more demanding titles, it uses less VRAM than Intel. It also gains that immature drivers from Intel, and what NVIDIA GPUs do often use their resources more generously for in trying to brute force more stable performance. And in this case, it worked brilliantly, except game engine just can't run anymore. So we need a remaster from that game because it is just outdated and it is a pain to play. The next game is Batman Arkham Asylum. This is a game which features Nvidia physics, 30-bit physics, which are discontinued with the Blackwell series, and I wanted to check how other GPUs handle it. And it seems that it is the issue that only all GPUs from Nvidia can run this game. So in a way, physics 52-bit especially is a mass graphic. We want to have an own GPU to play all games, random games. You don't know when you are going to get a game like that. For example, Batman Trilogy all features physics 52-bit inherently baked into it, so it has a very bad performance. Here we can see this from 99 fps when we mark it, and let's put it to our usual, let's say 51 to, let's say, 228. I want it a bit longer to show. You see, the issue with comparing two GPUs is that they do not work the same. Here we can see that Arc GPU is getting insane FPS and very consistent performance. And you can see from this graph that it is working a lot harder than Nvidia GPU in opening scenes. It seems that by driver optimizations and well, just at the driver level, game is locked at about 60, 70, 80 fps. It doesn't rise more even if it gets performance, VRAM and everything. Uh, and another big difference is that during in-game cinematics, uh, NVIDIA GPU just drops at 50 FPS, and as you can see, it just chills. And Arc GPU is just working its hardest to render with scenes, and it's very inconsistent in its performance, and even these 99 FPS are just awful. When it is running at such high frame rate, it is constantly jumping all over the place. GPU shouldn't behave like that. You should need a FPS lock by default. GPU should have somewhat similar performance. On the issue with 1% loss, you can see that Arc GPU is just terrible. When physics affects it always tanks its performance like insane. It gets insane performance drop. Nvidia GPU maintains that level a lot better. Of course, you can see it also got one stutter, but in general it is a lot better. And you can see this even well in cinematics. It is a lot more stable than Arc GPU. Let's remove this data point from comparison to see how much difference there is. And you can see it is about 50% difference. So Arc GPU is so much worse in playing with all games, and in my experience it constantly stuttered, and when a game wanted to show physics heavy scenes, it wasn't playable, it wasn't pleasant. So they want to make for you a pleasant experience, and it is the opposite. Game starts to stutter so much when we are using this physics. And you can see from entire graph that it maintains that massive difference. Let's say from this 57 to 256, 57 to 256, the biggest period, and 60 FPS difference in 1% loss. It means that Arc CPUs can't game use all the titles at all practically to physics, and this has implication that even AMD GPUs can't run all the titles properly due to physics support. So if you want to buy a GPU for all games, to be connoisseur, to be a gourmand of all games, so you need practically just Nvidia GPU, and anything so and especially in Ampere cards like RTX 380 if 3000. I am just running at this point. Now let's check the Force Unleashed. It is a 7th generation game, which I couldn't get a proper straight answer. Does it have physics accelerated by GPU or CPU or something in between? There wasn't much information, so I just wanted to check out. It is the first level. It is quite good for benchmarking, and you can see there is some wild differences. The issue is again the same. This is my software doing nonsense. It is a buggy software and it doesn't properly run. So we need to exclude this part. So 42 to 365. 42 to 365. And you can see this is now where the problem with these spikes, they are way too big, and when I played with Nvidia GPU, I didn't notice that they lack spikes. So these issues are from the coding software not working properly at all. And yes, we are having problems because if I want to make complex benchmarking, so putting game performance data into Excel sheets, I need software, and the most famous one it doesn't work properly at all. It has errant readings like this. So let's take one part where it worked properly. 53 to 103. And you can see this is what I wanted to see. No performance difference or negligible performance difference. This is where Arc GPU could say performance is just as good, and you could use it for all gamings. And you can see Nvidia GPU has with jams which might be related to in-game short cutscenes and 1% logs. And yes, but this is the problem, actual problem. I noticed it when I played with the RX GPU, but it has with weird performance spikes, drops in 1% logs, and this drop was noticeable. I believe it was during transitions of in-game cinematics or some physics-heavy scenes. It felt a little bit random, but it was constantly here, and you can see it just doesn't compare. Even if it exclude these dips, you can see that NVIDIA GPU has a lead constantly. 1% low, so it would be equal, but due to poor Intel drivers, you have these issues in random games with 1% lows, and it just feels like a discount brand. Like it is almost good enough, but when you want to do something a little bit out of the ordinary, it breaks. Nvidia, it works more often than not. And let's say, and you can see the same issues with Arc GPU has a lot of use drops where Intel where Nvidia you can see it is a lot more stable. This is in game cinematic and it runs stably, uh, and on Arc it has bigger drops. These drops are noticeable when cinematic starts and ends. And yes, it just makes it overall worse experience playing on Intel GPU than on Nvidia one. Now I want to show you GTA 5 performance. It is one of a newer game. I put these games who are very popular, like Redemption GTA. Well, from one thing I had them on my computer, on another I wanted to stress test them on newer games, but all the gen games without ray tracing, with reliance heavily on rasterization, and in addition, this game is received the ray tracing updates, and it is a good case study to see how they perform in these transitionary games who get ray tracing updates. So let's start from GTA 5. Settings are very high, and it is in-game benchmark, and it is a lot easier to properly benchmark them, but I already getting errant readings from my recording software, and it is difficult. But let's say that let's remove this 47 to 84, and you can see this is where beef of RTX 3080 comes into effect. It is a lot bigger GPU, it is a lot more powerful, and well, it is old, so older, so you get probably will get more less of a lifetime from it, but the pricing is similar. It is 300 versus 360 euros. Maybe RGPU fell a little bit, but when you are buying a GPU as a retro gaming for retro gaming and to put into older computer, or it's just you don't need that performance anymore. You can buy this old flagship which nobody wants uh, for pennies on a dollar, and get a lot more performance than buying something newer. This is where used market is supposed to shine, and at least with Ampere, it is still the case that you can get a great bargains. Yes. Now 1% loss. See, there is no comparison here. It is just getting demolished. What is interesting with ray tracing, but Arc performs very well in ray tracing performance and tasks. I played Cogwar's Legacy with quality upscaling at 4K with Arc 7070 at 40 FPS, and for a budget GPU to handle the newest game so well with ray tracing was amazing. Uh, and it often strikes above its category. When it works very well. And let's see, you can see there is already again anomalies in recording software. So let's take 41 to 97. You can see this is a difference, unless 99%. Oh, I have issue again with the recording software. with 9% loss, it is golf VAT. It was about 90%. Now it is 42. So you can see it really lower happy with ray tracing and why it performs surprisingly well. It is tech enthusiasts in RGPUs. Suddenly they weren't embraced like that. And this is, yes, my software gets again. It's often produces errant performance metrics like that. You need to have proper recording software. It was already a mess. It produces unique columns for each game, which each GPU at least understandable. But you can record same game after some time, and it will produce different columns. It is very lazily done software, and this is the result. It is bugged. It is unsuited for any serious benchmarking, and these people expect to be paid for their software. It is very lazily and shoddily done piece of Mirror's Edge is another game which I played at the moment, and I stopped at the GPU because I wanted to test same scene with Nvidia GPU and how it performs. Already you can see that recording software bugs. So let's take from 10 to 110. Buffer ended. Okay, let's make 11 to be more fair. And you can see this is what you expect about the same level of performance. Surprisingly, this is where Arc is well more optimized. It uses a lot of less resources. Nvidia, you can see that it is struggling to run. It is running at full throttle and it doesn't produce results. It uses a lot of VRAM and a lot of performance from its core. It is working hard, but it doesn't produce FPS. And you can see here it is waiting. We're both waiting. So CPU is busy, so maybe CPU is bottlenecking. Maybe game engine is bottlenecking, but it is just basic performance until you look at this. This is very systematic of all physics again. They have terrible 1% dips, and Nvidia GPU runs well, quite stable in this. It doesn't have any dramatic dips in performance, and you can actually play game on this GPU in a stable manner. With Arc, you cannot. So it is a second game when where Arc just can't play a game where it should, where it's quite mainstream game, and it should know better. Now let's take Overlord. This isn't a software issue, at least for once. It is actually Nvidia driver's fault. It is an old game and something doesn't work properly when in full screen game actually performs terribly like that with 1% loss. You can play it well with Arc. You could play properly. I managed to play Overlord well with window wet mode when it performs probably even better. It didn't get any drops like you can see Arc CPU sometimes get, but because well this is a clear case where I couldn't play the game without tinkering, and it is the issue. I expect better from Nvidia, but and I expect it to run all games flawlessly. At least if it gets issues, other manufacturers should also get the issues, and this is unacceptable. They're charging premium prices, but their driver support for old games can be lacking. It is understandable. Who has just a refined taste as me? Nobody's going to play Overlord again, so they don't have to do it, but you will just want them to be better. And this is I will have to disappoint for Nvidia for that. Now let's take a look at Red Dead Redemption. You can see again the recording software issues. It is counting. I spent so many hours trying to fix the mess in this benchmarking which the software did. So I'm not going to redo everything again. At this point, I'm putting more effort into this video than actual big benchmarkers do. So we took one more stable region, and you can see unless it performs 8 times better, this data is wrong. And the issue is, well, Arc CPU couldn't run this game properly. It got a mirror effect where you could see through the terrain. So even if Arc GPU data here is correct, it actually couldn't run game well in any satisfactory way. And you can see there is something uh, where is a massive CPU wait time, so it indicates that somewhere is bottleneck. If CPU is waiting for job, it probably means that the GPU can't process frames. It would indicate that but it works a lot better. Here is the issue that CPU is not waiting on GPU, so there is a massive GPU uh, driver issue where it creates a massive overhead for CPUs, which can't run as efficiently as on Nvidia GPU. And you can see from lack of CPU wait time that GPU manages to create more work for CPU. And 1% loss where it actually recorded my data properly. You can see that it runs just a lot better, up to 60% more. And yes, it drops about similar. If it drops from 52 to 50, you will feel, but it is not as dramatic as here. From 30 to 50, it is half of it. And so, since you don't have that much of performance, it is a lot more noticeable when you can't maintain 50 FPS. If it is, you at least can maintain 50 FPS, so you got FPS lock at 60 by the game, and go, but it runs well. It is seriously a difficult game to run, but it looks good. And well, what is else interesting? This is where, yes, Arc GPU doesn't run properly. Is it drivers? It is a shilling, and when it starts to run from 49, so from here it starts to run properly. It might be cinematic related issues. And VRAM amount here 94, it is similar, so we are both well optimized in this regard. Now to Tom Clancy New Vegas 2. This was once a flagship game which pushed the boundaries of FPS tactical genre. And now it feels a little bit dated, and it is dated from a gameplay perspective and graphically dated, but it is one game where FPS matters, smooth performance matters, and let's see how well it runs. So 99 FPS, let's say from 50. So yes, the issues in recording software, like Gulf of information didn't record it properly. But what you can do? Oh, it might get recorded properly because it is a demanding game, and the engine just jumps to 600 from 400. RGPU is also producing a lot of frames. Uh, and you can see GPU might be bottlenecked by games itself, because it can produce so many frames. Something inside of it is waiting to be processed. Oh, or maybe it's just game engine doesn't allow for more data to be given. but let's see from similar. No, this theory doesn't stand because if that would be the case, uh, Nvidia GPU will have a greater wait time, but since our GPU has roughly the same wait time on average, it means that the game engine doesn't bottleneck here. It is solely down to GPU driver optimization, how much we can produce. So, in some part of where architecture is likely holding it back. And since you're producing so much frames, you better to cap lock it anyways. So let's see what really matters. It is 1% loss, and it is make a big for any game, especially tactical shooters. This is you can see what Nvidia GPU is actually disappointing for the first time, because it produces worse 1% frame rate, one RX GPU. But on the good side, Intel has some driver issues because it has severe drops and a lot more commands. You can see 118 to 17, so 93 to 45, so it's about golf, and this is less than golf. So how to say, RGPU is more stable, but it has some issues on a driver level which causes uses drops in frame rates, and you can notice it that you are playing, but it doesn't feel right. It sometimes lags, but you forget that it lagged, and you end up with worse experience, but you can't put the finger on why it is the worst. Well, this is the reason why it is the worst experience, because it has a bigger depth than Nvidia GPU, but it runs on average more smoothly, and you can see at least in some section it beats Arc, but in general it is just as good. So so I would say that it is one of the games where it is a tie. And it doesn't look good when your GPU is dying at best with the other, or he has very small lead within the margin comparator. Now I added Warcraft 3 because I bought the forged version and it was easy to test. So I launched a skirmish on the same app and with the same race, and I played. So it is just a very rough estimate. I just wanted to see how we perform in new releases of old games when they update graphics. Is with RTS CPU bound and GPU bound, so that's it matters even for RTS, all RTSs. And you can see, yes, it does. There is still room for performance. With a bigger Nvidia GPU, you're getting to 260 against 180, so you still need a good GPU for on all RTS if you want to look at 360, 240. It is still not achievable results. This is the irony. We are pushing the graphics and resolutions, but we still cannot get the proper frame rate. By proper, I mean esport level on a lot of games which are supposed to be esports. 1% loss, the most important. Again, a lot heavier on Nvidia side. I would give it a tie because Nvidia have these drops, and it feels that Nvidia experience is choppy. It lags from time to time a lot more than Intel. But the problem why I cannot give a tie because Intel also does the same thing here, and another issue is that they on average are 39% slower, so you are getting worse experience and same sharpness. So previously I gave Nvidia tie because it won on one front. It was a more stable experience despite being slower on average when it came to 1% loss. Yeah, I cannot give Harik the same treatment because it doesn't even produce more stable experience. So it is just overall worse experience than Nvidia. Now, Witcher 3, the big flagship title which came out with GTX 900 series. You could buy HDS 970 with a free bundle of this game, and it was just enough to run that game. Now it got updated, and RTX 5080 is just barely enough to run this game again. So, the more time change, the more they remain the same. This is the starting village where you come at first, and I just ran a lap around it to see how it performs. So let's see where we both started to work properly, settle down into routine to give the most equal comparison. And you can see this is where brute force of Nvidia GPU makes a big difference. It just have more power and it can just produce better FPS. It is 1% off. This is the 99 FPS and 7. It is very similar. It can, yes, you can produce over 60 and 1% loss are quite stable. It get the easier selection and with both GPUs. So let's see how it handles ray tracing. I put ray tracing because all games are constantly getting updated by ray tracing, and Arc GPU is better when battle than Ampere architecture in ray tracing, despite being smaller die. So it is like Arc A7070 we have die size of RTX 5070, but its ray tracing is more on RTX 5070 Ti 5080 levels, but architecture is flawed, so it performs about RTX 5060 5060 Ti levels. So yes, and with the newest battle mage, they updated their architecture, and a lot of these inefficiencies may have been removed. So it might perform differently now. So let's see from 8 to 6 to 1. Yes, 90, it produces just more FPS in general. You can see it is really struggling. It is RT ray tracing or low quality upscaler. So it means that I use the performance mode and I put all the sliders on it, and quality upscaler of XSS from Arc GPU and DLSS from Nvidia GPU. So I allow them to do their own stuff. And yes, Arc GPU for such a little guy, it performs admirably well. You are getting console experience, so you can play this game as a console peasant. But even with Nvidia GPU, it is not really a very pleasant game to play like that. Because yes, it likes to stutter at times. You can see 27 FPS. From 42, it is noticeable experience that it is stuttery, and the game game is very heavy on CPU, and I would recommend just capping it at 30 FPS for stability. With Intel, it is better experience if you want to play at 50 FPS because well, relatively speaking, because it doesn't have to so much place to fall from, and that fell is lower because it is better at ray tracing. So yes, Ampere is not enough for Witcher 3. So you need either you need something from Lovelace. So RTX 4080 at the minimum for 60 FPS for my investigation. So this is the bare minimum which you need to play this game. Even if you say that you don't need all that fancy tracing features, alright, but you would want to put Nvidia Gearworks on, so it will tank what performance too here. At least you could play at stable 60 FPS. And this is another issue. Nvidia proprietary software and collaboration with developers give them what unseen benefit why you need Nvidia GPU, because it has various software like physics, gearworks, which gives you ultimate experience within the game which you want to experience to play. And this is again why you would buy lower worse experience. You have the money if you are doing retro PC, so you are buying what makes sense for you. And this was same extends to AMD GPUs. All these features just make AMD and ARC GPU just inferior options to Nvidia offerings. In conclusion, Nvidia won heavily. Even if we exclude more modern games where GPU size matters the most, it still has a strong lead in overall gaming. Intel has many unresolved driver issues up to this day. Even ARC has CPU performance overhead, thus making it pointless for older game systems. It also has worse 1% lows in most games. In addition, ARC software were lacking base features and still is inferior to GeForce experience in many ways. Lack of a 32-bit physics support makes Intel and AMD as poor choices for playing random old games, as any game will run poorly on these GPUs, while some will be unplayable, like Alice. All the Nvidia GPUs are heavily discounted, and thus the pricing argument is irrelevant. For retro gaming, you should have up to RTX 4090 due to physics 32-bit support. However, realistically, RTX 3080 provides the best balance between power, modernity, and pricing. If you want cheaper GPU, any 8GB variant from RTX era cards will be good enough. However, for 4K gaming, you need at least 10GB of VRAM for last gen AA titles. Overall, ARC GPU is an underdog. However, I'm disappointed by Intel progress in their drivers support. It is constantly fumbling and failing to deliver a viable product even after 3 to 4 years in the market at this moment. ARC GPUs together with Battle Mage have surprisingly good ray tracing performance and a lot of VRAM. We can pleasantly surprise you from time to time getting games which they have no right to run so well for the price point. Sadly, we only saw dash of greatness with Intel GPUs and they never became what they needed to be.